So today I'm recording in the forest because I'm out here to collect some stuff for something that I'm going to make. And I had to have a little break because I'm incredibly out of shape after having been sitting down on the couch pretty much all winter. At least that's what it feels like. But also in order to get to this forest over here, you kind of have to climb up this very steep ravine, because of course we're in Norway, so nothing here is flat except me. Today I'm going to collect some pine needles, and we'll see what else we can find out here. It's the end of February, so you won't find any wildflowers around this time of year, although it is already spring. You can hear the birds chirping, and there's some flowering, some signs of flowering on the trees. So spring is coming, but it's not here quite yet. So pine needles, they contain a lot of interesting stuff. So if you boil them, you can get washing up liquid, completely natural, hand washing soap and soap for your clothing and these kinds of things. So that's one of the things I intend to do with them. So pine needles is what we're looking for today, not fir needles. There's a huge difference between the two trees. Fir needles are actually quite good for making edible things, but pine needles you should not eat because it could potentially make you a little bit sick. Fir needles are much shorter, and they grow on the Christmas tree shaped type of tree, not on the really tall ones like the ones you can see in the background here. There's these really tall trees that have sort of clumps of needles in the top and in the end of their branches. That's a pine. But the ones over here, they grow quite close to the road, so I don't want to collect that, because that could potentially mean collecting something that contains heavy metals and other types of exhaust fume chemicals that I don't want to ingest or have on my hands or clothes or in anything that I use my pine needle soap for. So that's why we're going a little bit further into the forest. Also, walking around in the forest is very nice. I feel so much more in my element when I'm in the forest than really anywhere else. I do also love the ocean, but the forest is really where I belong. Which makes sense, because if you didn't know, my last name is Tapio, which is also the name of the Finnish forest god. And the story behind that name is pretty interesting. It's been in my family since probably the late 1700s, something like that. The reason why we have that name is because my great and so on father chose to have this name because he was born of someone else than the husband of his mother. So who his real father is, we do not know. So it might have been his father's name. It's a very common male name in Finland, usually a male first name. Perhaps he was very interested in old Finnish mythology and old Finnish culture, because there was this wave of national romanticism going on back in those days. And perhaps he chose this name not only because his father wasn't the man who was married to his mother, but also as a sort of a symbol of him not perhaps belonging to the culture that he was born into, which was the Swedish-speaking coastal culture, which was pretty much the cultural elite back in the day. but rather that he belonged to the more ancestral Finnish mythological, more interesting culture, and perhaps also that he felt a bit like a child of the forest, which I can totally relate to. Anyway, it's a very significant name that I'm quite happy to bear. When you're out in the forest and you're looking at all of these different kinds of moss growing on all the rocks and the trees and everywhere, it really reminds me of this painter from Sweden that I have always really liked, called John Bauer. He painted a lot of mythological and forest-themed images of elves and trolls and these kinds of things. It's always been one of my absolute favorite artists. This here also is not what we're looking for today. This is a juniper tree. You can see that it has all of these little short little branches or short little needles. And juniper berries can be used for spices. It's a very sort of a pepper-like little berry. They start out dark blue or pale blue, and then they darken, and then they become almost like peppercorns when they dry. And they are quite popular to use as a spice. But this is not a pine, and it's not what we're looking for. This here is your typical fir tree. You can see the conical shape, typical Christmas tree with the short little needles. And it is also not what we're looking for. In the spring, they will get new shoots, which will be bright green. And those are the ones that you can collect in order to make teas and syrups and such things. And here is a beautiful example of what happens when the little Christmas tree grows up. This is a fully grown, beautiful fir tree. And how do I know it's a fir? Well, I can see the small, tiny little needles, how short they are, and I also see the shape of the tree. Their needles and branches and things, they are usually much more evenly spaced than on the pine, which you can see here, which has a completely different shape. Both the shape and the coloration of pine trees is quite different from that of a fir tree. You can see, well, perhaps you can't see, but the bark of this type of tree is a little bit more red in color, and how the branches are arranged is completely different from a fir tree. They, for one, do not grow as low to the ground, and they tend to have their needles more at the end of the branches rather than evenly spaced along the entire branch. And this here might look like it's related to the two, but this is actually heath or heather. Here's more blueberry. Well, obviously there's no berries and no leaves on them yet, but They're quite easy to recognize anyway. And over here is the famous lingon. This one is actually evergreen, even though it has leaves. Usually most evergreen bushes have needles rather than leaves. Yeah, if you hear or see people in this video, it's because this is far from one of those mythical, undisturbed, deep forests of fantasy books and historical record. It's, after all, in the middle of a quite densely populated city. So I see plenty of trail runners and people out with their children and their dogs, and I've seen some tourists here too, or perhaps exchange students or something like that. So there's quite a few both locals and foreigners in this forest today. I have just spotted a pine tree of suitable size right over here. So we're gonna go there. And why do I want to pick the needles off of a pine of such a small size? Well, obviously, as you might see on this example over here, the fully grown ones usually have their branches quite high up from the ground. So we can't exactly collect those. I don't have a ladder, and I think that I might be a little too old to risk climbing that high of a tree. So we're gonna go and get the ones that are lower to the ground, simply because they haven't grown fully quite yet. So that's why we are collecting pine needles from a smaller pine. The ground over here is so cushy and soft to walk on. It's quite nice. Here we are. This is a pine tree. A very small one, but that's what we were looking for. And this is probably the big brother of this one. Another reason why I came to the forest today is because I want to find a suitable branch, which I am going to cut and bring home. I brought with me my little portable saw. This is my foldable saw, which is quite easy to just put in my deep pockets. That's why I designed a coat like this with as many pockets as possible. Because you never know when you need to bring a saw or a knife or something like this. So this here is a rowan tree. I'm quite sure of it because I recognize this coloring and patterning on the trunk of the tree. And I also found some evidence on the ground among the leaf litter, because rowan trees have these very recognizable feather-shaped leaves. And that's how I know this is definitely a rowan tree. And why do I pick this specifically? Well, because rowan trees, while they are well known for their magical properties and their more symbolical and mythological properties, they are also well known for wood carving, because when the tree is green, it's quite soft and easy to carve with a typical carving knife like this. This kind of little typical short knife for carving, which I of course carry in one of my deep pockets. But rowan trees are very good for wood carving, because the green tree is quite soft and easily worked, but when it hardens and when it dries, it gets quite hard. So it's a good quality tree for making decorative things. And I like wood carving, and I want to make my own staff, because why wouldn't I want to have a staff? So I am going to bring a branch with me home. I'm not going to take too much of the tree, only a small bit, only what it can handle, because I don't want to forage in an unsustainable way. I didn't take much of the pine tree either, only as many needles as I needed, no more. There are many gods and other mythological elements connected to the rowan tree, but it is also seen as a magical tree in folk magic, because it will actually prevent people on a journey from getting lost. So it is also known as the traveler's tree, which means I couldn't pick a more perfect tree for a walking stick. And here you can clearly see what we mean about calling wood green, because it is literally still green when it's young and fresh and not dried. Rowan trees are also supposedly trees that will ward off evil. I could probably stay out here all day, but not what I came for, and well, the rain simply never stops over here, and sitting down on the ground gets quite cold in this weather. So before I get a cold, I will just bring my stuff back home. I've got plenty enough pine needles, and I've got a very nice rowan staff. So I'm going to make kind of a liquid soap with only 3 ingredients: pine needles and common ivy. So around my garden there's so much ivy, like the entire border of the garden is just ivy. So there's quite a lot of this around here, and it's quite common in this area. So I'm not afraid of disturbing nature by harvesting this, and as always I only take exactly what I need and no more. And that's a pretty useful rule when you are foraging or harvesting anything at all. You only take 1/3 for yourself, because you need to leave 1/3 for other animals and other creatures to use, and you also need to leave 1/3 for the plant to be able to propagate and reproduce itself. So otherwise you risk disturbing the ecosystem, and I follow this rule of thirds no matter what kind of plant I am harvesting, even if I'm harvesting a very common type of plant, because you never know, you might disturb something in the ecosystem if you take too much, if you take more than you need, and it doesn't feel right to do that. So these 2 bags are full of pine needles and ivy leaves. So I simply bring the leaves and the pine needles to a boil, and then I let it simmer for a few hours. It depends on how much water you add and how big your pot is. I'm assuming it's going to take a lot longer time to brew this liquid soap if you use a lot of water or if you use a lot of ingredients. If you want to, you can also add a few drops of an essential oil of your choosing. Anything you think smells good is fine, but I would recommend lavender because that's the traditional soap smell. Lavender also has certain antiseptic and other cleansing properties. So this is actually a spoon that I have carved myself with a normal pocket knife, and when I'm stirring this pine needle soup, it smells amazing. It's actually really nice. I don't think it needs any added essential oils because it already smells so nice on its own. If you crush or chop the leaves, of course, you can do this much faster, as well as if you make a much smaller batch. Then you can even just simmer it for about 15 minutes and it will be done. But since I used so much and I had so much water, and I also didn't care to chop the leaves, well then it takes a little bit longer. A few hours may be overkill in most cases, but I think it will be fine because I kept it at a very low temperature, so I wasn't risking scalding or burning any of the ingredients. And I am going to put this solution into a spray bottle. You can also just put it in a normal bottle, or just use it as a normal liquid detergent. And of course, it's very smart to allow your mixture to cool before you transfer it to any glass or plastic bottles, because glass can explode if it's heated too quickly, and plastic can melt in too high temperatures. So just wait for your mixture to cool first. It makes for a very mild and effective natural homemade soap, which is also gentle on the skin and doesn't contain any of the irritating stuff that more harsh chemical detergents can contain. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.